Today's early childhood topic is books, reading aloud, and more. The focus of today will be to learn all about literacy and young children. My name is Steve Kimmel. We're going to start by focusing on why it is important to read aloud to young children. Just what is it all about? So why is it important to read aloud to children? Reading aloud helps children to develop important skills in literacy. Literacy is defined as the ability to read and write. Very young preschoolers will not be able to read and write just yet, but we are giving them a foundational skill for learning to read and write. Language. Language is defined as the principal method of human communication, consisting of words used in a structured and conventional way and conveyed by speech, writing, or gesture. So when we speak to each other, we are using language. When we read the printed words in a book, we are also reading language because it is structured in a conventional way and conveyed by our speech. The third reason here is vocabulary. Vocabulary is defined as the body of words used in a particular language. We will focus on the English language, which we know best, and the vocabulary are all the words that we use in our language. I've always said that a child will never be able to say a word if they've never heard the word before. Continuing with why it is important to read aloud to children. Reading aloud to children helps children to fall in love with reading. This inspires children to want to learn how to read. So if children love books, they love listening to books, they're going to be inspired and want to develop the skills so that they can read themselves when they get a little bit older. Reading aloud is great for bonding. There's nothing like sitting down on a couch with a child or two and reading a book. This is a good way for parents to bond together, as well as for teachers and children to bond. Reading can also help with discussing difficult issues. So if there has been a death of a pet or a death in the family or some other issue that is just difficult to talk about, there are many books out there that you can use to serve as a tool for talking about difficult issues with children. Books are also a portal to your kids' interest. So if you know that your child has an interest in baking or an interest in trains or any other interest, you can find books about that topic, and that's kind of a window that you can use to watch your child develop that interest. Books spark curiosity and a thirst for learning. So if you read a book upon a topic, the child may become very curious about that topic and want to learn more. Therefore, you've launched a thirst for learning in that child. Next, we're going to talk about techniques for reading aloud. Just what do we do when we're reading aloud to a group of children or to an individual child? First of all, it's important how we begin the book. When I read a book to a child or a group of children, I'm always going to read the title of the book so the child knows what the book is called. I'm going to read the author's name and explain what this means. So when I'm saying who the author is, I'll say this is the person who wrote all the words in the story that we're about to read. We want to also read the illustrator's name and explain what this means. So the illustrator is the person who drew the pictures for the book that we're about to read. You can also use the name author and illustrator when a child is in the classroom and they are writing something. They have become the author. Or when they're drawing a picture of something, they have become the illustrator. So remember to use author and illustrator often. Optionally, and you don't have to do this every time, but after you've read the title and you look at the picture on the title page or the front of the book, you can ask children, hey, what do you think this book is going to be about? And they can give you theories about what it is going to be about just based on the title and the pictures that they see. Occasionally, I like to use a silly title to grab interest in the book. For example, if I were reading the story Caps for Sale, and it's a familiar book to children, they know that the peddler is going to sell caps, I might say, today we are going to read Elephants for Sale, or today we are going to read Toasters for Sale. The kids love that kind of humor because it is just so off from what the truth is. So that grabs their interest and helps them to focus on the story that you're about to read. We also want to demonstrate just how books work. This is called reading conventions. We all know this as adults and as high school students. We read from the front of the book to the back. So I might say that out loud. I'm going to start at the front of the book and then go to the back of the book. We read from the top of the page to the bottom. So I don't do this when reading every page, but I do it enough for the child to understand this convention where I point to the top of the page when I start reading there, and then I kind of move my finger down as I read to the bottom of the page. These are things that we all know how to do because we've learned reading conventions as a young child. Also, in the English language, we read from the left to the right. So similarly with my finger, I would start with the words on the left, and I would move them to the right as I read the words in that sentence. Read with excitement. No one wants to listen to a monotone and boring reading. So I used an example there of not having the animated voice, being very monotone. All of my words sounded the same. We don't want to read like that because that is boring for children. Rather, we want to read with animation. So we're going to change the tone of our voice. We're going to become softer. We're going to become louder. So we just want to read that book with animation and excitement. One of the goals that we have when we read books is to have the words come alive to children as you read the book with excitement. Another good thing to do is to point to words on occasion, just to help children learn that the words in a book are symbols that represent the spoken word that we use in our language and our conversations. Another thing to do when reading aloud is to invite participation. Invite children to join in with repetitive text, making reading a shared experience. Many books have repetitive text in them. Good books have repetitive text in them, so the children will know what words are going to be said. Later on, when we read together and we look at some books, we will have some books with repetitive text, so we can know just what this means. When you read a book, you can make observations of what you see happening. So looking at the picture, you can talk about what is happening. And along with that, you can ask children to predict what they think will happen next. This kind of prediction helps children to stay engaged with the story and helps them kind of follow the plot so we can know what might happen next in the story. Then the children can see if they were correct or incorrect in the prediction. I can't see. That is a common thing that children might say when you're reading a book. So rather than having them say, I can't see, here are some strategies to make sure they can see. Before I read a book to children, I remind them that I am going to read the words first to myself so everybody can hear it, and then I'm going to hold the book in front of me and I'm going to move it from left to right and right to left so that all the children can see the illustrations on those pages. When they know that I'm going to do that, and when I follow through and do that, then I tend not to hear "I can't see." Use big books whenever possible. I'm not sure when big books were created, but big books are wonderful. If you're reading to a group of children, you can have a big book set up on an easel, and the children can easily see the pictures in the book. Another good idea is to read the book ahead of time so you can tell the story while you read it. If I haven't read a book before, I'm so focused on the words that I'm reading, and it's kind of hard to be engaged with the children. But when I've read a book, when I'm very familiar with it, then I can really still read the words, but do it more of a storytelling kind of way where I'm telling the story. Another thing to do is to help children sit in ways where they can see best. So as you look out to children, you can see if somebody is sitting up way tall and you need them to sit down or move to the back. So just try to be be aware of how children are sitting so we can make sure that everybody can see well. And that way we will avoid hearing, "I can't see." A couple miscellaneous tips at the end here. First one is be ready to read a book again and again and again and again and again. Popular stories, children just want to hear them again and again. And that's not what we do as older people, as high school students and as adults. But with children, we want to read their favorite books again and again. And what happens when we read them again and again, the children enjoy it, plus they start to memorize it, and that can be more of a shared reading experience where you're telling the story together. Another miscellaneous tip is to be a book champion. Help parents to understand the importance of books and reading aloud. So a good way to do this is when a parent comes to pick up a child, say, "Oh, today we read this book and Johnny loved the illustrations in this book." And really encourage parents to read aloud to their children. You could even have a family night where everybody comes together and the focus is on reading. So you could model for them, model for the parents, how you go about reading aloud to young children. You could talk about how they go about choosing books for children. So really, I encourage you to be a book champion to help parents learn about books so that they can spur on the development of their child. Next, we're going to focus a little bit on choosing books for young children. I referred to this one a little bit ago. This book is called Caps for Sale by Esfer Slobodkina. I've read this so many times that I remember that it was written in 1947, and it is a great book with repetitive text in it. So choosing books for young children, here are some tips. I want you to look and ask yourself some questions. Does the book include colorful illustrations? Children are really focused on using their senses. They're using their eyes to see the pages in the book. So we really want to make sure it has interesting and colorful illustrations. Does the book have lovable characters? Many books are fiction books for young children, and they'll have characters in them that the kids grow to love. One that I'm thinking of right now is Corduroy, and Corduroy is a little bear that is found in several different books who is really a lovable character in children's books. Does the book have repeated or predictable text so that children can memorize the text and know what is coming next and even recite it with you when you're reading that part of the book? Is the book about a fun topic? As I mentioned a little bit ago, a lot of books that we read to young children are fiction books, but you can also find some nonfiction books about topics that children might be interested in. They might be interested in firefighting, they might be interested in bakeries, they might be interested in dinosaurs, as all children are. So find some fun topics. Also, children love humor. We all love to laugh, and a lot of books lend themselves to having a lot of humor in them. I'm thinking of a series of books called Froggy, where Froggy does all kinds of crazy things that the kids love to laugh at. Similar to fun topics, topics of interest to children. So you're going to get to know the children in your classroom, and you can select books that you know will be interesting at least to some of the children in your classroom. A few more tips here. Is the book quality literature versus a commercial for a product someone is selling? So a lot of books that you'll find are based on a TV show, based on a movie, based on some kind of character. And these really don't lend themselves to be good read aloud books. I don't really like them because I think they're really books just to help sell that product. Is the book you're reading age and individually appropriate? So by age appropriate, if you're reading to a group of 2-year-olds, you're going to want to have some short books with some simple illustrations that are appropriate for 2-year-olds. If you're reading aloud to a second grade classroom, you're going to want to read a book that's going to be interesting to them, a book that they can really visualize what is happening in the story. You also want your books to be individually appropriate. So if you're reading to a group of 3-year-olds, just know that not all 3-year-olds are the same. So you want to have a book that works individually with the different children in your classroom. I guess individual appropriateness is more something you would look for if you're reading one-on-one with a child. Is the book interesting? We all are drawn to things that are interesting to us, and children are no different. Sometimes we want to pick books that are related to something that children are into. So if children are into, I've used firefighting already. If children are into a topic that is something that you might be learning about in your classroom, let's say grocery stores, you might be learning about grocery stores and doing some dramatic play with grocery stores. You could pick some books about grocery stores, about food, because that's what children are into at that point in your class. A few more tips here. Is the book from an author familiar with children, with the children that are in your classroom? So you don't have to always pick familiar books, but sometimes it's good to pick an author that has written many different books because the children will become accustomed to that author and really want to hear books from that author. Sometimes books are part of a series. I mentioned the Froggy series before, the Corduroy series as well. So these are books that feature the same characters, and there's a lot of different books on them. So it's kind of neat to find series because then children can relate to the character and see what the character does. It's going to be fun in the book that you're reading. The next section I'm calling Beyond the Book, integrating book activities in your classroom. So pictured on this slide are some neat books that I've used before called story stretchers. The one at the top is more of a preschool story stretcher, and then at the bottom it's a story stretcher for the primary grades. And the point of story stretchers is to use a book as a foundation and then extend the learning to different areas in the classroom. So I've pictured a few things here. There's a really neat book called Freight Train by Donald Cruz. Donald Cruz is an author and illustrator who has done many different children's books. So that's one of those where I would find a lot of Donald Cruz books to read to the children. And the extension for that is a color sorting train. So this book has different color train cars in there. And for a young child, kind of a math skill, kind of a thinking skill, and a problem solving skill is sorting. So I have a picture here of the different train cars, and then I have different objects. And the child's task is to sort those objects by the proper train car. So a good, fun way to extend freight train. This is a fun book as well. It's called There Was an Old Lady Who Swallowed a Fly. While I'm on this one, I want to talk about some books that are best sung. So children love your voice no matter how good or bad it is. So this is a book that I would sing with children. And then the extension thing there is kind of a flannel board. So the old lady would stick on a bulletin board or on a flannel board that you're using, and then you could give each child one of the animals. So as you're singing this book, then the child would bring up the things and put them on the old lady, or you could do the same thing while you're reading or singing the story. Brown Bear, What Do You See?" by Bill Martin Jr. and Eric Carle is a classic. This one shows the different things over here on the side, and these could be used in a few different ways. Let's say that you put all the animals on one side of a board, and have them attached by magnet, and then on the other side of the board have the brown bear, the red bird, the blue horse words also on a magnet, and the child could simply match. So this is a matching game. This is giving them experience with the printed word. So that would be an extension activity for Brown Bear, What Do You See? You could also use this as a sequencing activity where you could say, now what did Brown Bear see first, second, third, fourth, and so on. So you could use it as a sequencing activity for children's memory, and so they could remember the order things came in. This is another fun book if you give a mouse a cookie. This author also is if you give a moose a muffin. I forget all the titles, but there's a lot of different books by Laura Numeroff. And this is a cookie jar kind of thing. And in this one, this would be more for an older classroom where the picture is there. So it's got the picture of the key, the duck, the igloo, etc. And then there are cookies with the first letter of that word. So the child would sound out the word hat, and they would find the letter H and put on the hat. So this is a letter sound matching game that you could use and as an extension for if you give a mouse a cookie. So we talked about books and reading aloud. We've talked about things that you can do to further use books in your classroom. Now we're going to talk just in general about how you can create a print-rich classroom. We really want children to see print used in many meaningful ways in the classroom so that they can have that exposure to print. So the first tip on this one is for you to include a writing center in your classroom. In a writing center, and I'm going to show some pictures shortly, you would provide a variety of writing instruments, pens, pencils, crayons, markers, etc., paper of different sizes, and writing examples. You could also have little books that are pre-stapled, so if a child wants to make a book, they could make a book using what you've provided for them. In a writing center, you want to organize the materials well so children can use the materials responsibly and independently. Whenever we organize materials well, it shows children that we care for the materials, and that's our expectation that they care for the materials. It allows the children to get what they need to use and to use it, and then to put it away as well. So when we organize well, it's easier to keep things well organized, and that's best for kids. So I have pictured here two different writing centers, just kind of showing what they have. You'll see on the one on the left, there are bins that have various things in them. So on the far right container, it looks like it's a bunch of punches. So the child could punch a star or different things. At the top, we see different writing materials. There's clipboards down below, a bunch of different stuff. So this is a place where children could go to write when they want to. The one on the right is more for an early primary classroom where it talks about you could write a story, you could make a list, you could make a book, you could make a card for someone. It has some dictionaries down there so they can see words. So there's a lot of different things depicted there. So these are just two examples of what a writing center would look like. If you want to learn more, I would really encourage you to just Google it or go to Pinterest and you'll see a lot more pictured there. So some things to include in writing centers. I like to provide posters showing sight words that children may copy if they wish. So sight words are just familiar words of things that kids are going to encounter. They usually have just a few letters when children are just learning how to recognize letters and words. But they can use them as an example if they want to write a word like mom or dad or fish or ball, that kind of thing. Another neat thing to do to make the classroom children's own is to have a picture of the child with their name written under it, as well as pictures of common items with the written word by it. So I'm going to illustrate that here. So these are picture words. This is an example that you could buy from one of the early childhood vendors showing boots, dog, flower, frog, ball, and boat. So if a child wants to write one of those words, just for the fun of it, because they have that interest, they could take that word and they could write the word on their paper. And then this is just a cheesy example of how you would take a child's picture. You would write their name under the picture. It's nice to have these cards laminated, and then you can have them there. So if they want to write friends' names, because friends are meaningful to them, they could do that. You could extend this and even have pictures of their family. I can picture an entire family there where you would have mom, sister's name, brother's name, etc., whoever's in that child's family. Another thing to as far as using a print-rich classroom is to use writing throughout the day in meaningful ways. You can make lists. We all make lists to help us remember what to do. So you can make lists with children of stuff that you need to get from the supply room. So let's say that kids want you to get a bunch of trucks out and construction stuff. You could say, okay, let's write down what I should get when I go to the supply room to help me remember. Kids will watch you do that writing, and those spoken words will become written words while they watch you write them down. You can make a list of items to buy at the store, books you want to read together, etc. Something I enjoy doing as well is what I call Who is Next list for favorite activities. And a favorite activity appeared there. When I was teaching young children, we had this trampoline. It was very popular. I would only have it out when I was able to spot children. I would put a chair right in front of the trampoline facing the child, and that way I could make sure that they did not spring over the front bar and land on their nose. I was there to make sure they were safe. Because it was such a popular activity, I would often write down the names of the children that wanted to do that. And then the names were used in a very meaningful way, where they saw that John was first, Anne was second, Mary was third, Joe was fourth, and so on. So that's a good thing to do, is Who is Next list when you're making print come alive to children. Write children's names and take dictation. So when a child makes a picture, it's good to write their name on it if they're not able to. If they're able to have them write their name on it. When I write a name on a picture, I always ask the child to ask or to tell me where they would want the name printed. It might be on the front, it might be on the back, it might be in one corner or another corner. Whenever I write something, I want to write in a very clear font as if they were learning how to write. So I just want to write very clearly, setting a good example of what good letter formation looks like. In this picture here, the teacher probably said, "Tell me about your picture. Would you like me to write anything on there?" And the child said, "Well, this is a picture of my family." So the teacher said, "Well, may I write my family on there?" And the child said yes to them. It looks like there's some other labels down here of what some kids' names are. Another good thing to do is to label items in your classroom. Put labels on things like your shelf, your mirror, table, chair, etc. It shows children that objects not only have names, but there's a written word for each name. Again, we're making the symbol connect with the actual object. The symbol is the word, the chair is the object. Another good thing to do is to label classroom areas and interest centers. So if you have an inviting sign indicating block area or dramatic play area, it announces to the children, to the teachers, and the parents the name of that area, and it uses print in a meaningful way. Just as we would see a sign as we're entering a town saying what town that is, we're labeling an area in our classroom so everybody knows what that is. Next, we're going to focus on having books in your classroom. So books are a very important thing to have in all classrooms, especially early childhood classrooms. So pictured here on the left is a bookshelf. It's a low bookshelf. There are a dozen books on there. The books are very easy to see. The child can see the cover of the book, so they know when selecting the book, it's easy for them to do that. So this is a really good thing to have in a classroom. When I was a classroom teacher, I often had a little book kind of logo behind where a book is showing a one-to-one correspondence. I didn't want 30 books to end up on a bookshelf because then they don't get cared for as well and they're hard to see the covers. I really wanted, as we see here, like 12 books on the shelf. So I would put a little sticker behind each one showing that one book goes in that position. Sometimes after children put books away, if they were kind of put away in a kind of random way, I would ask a child if they could go be the librarian for me. And I would say, "Hey, I just want you to match up one book with one sticker," and then they would arrange the books so they're ready for the kids to use next time. So this bookshelf illustrates one place where books should be in a classroom, and now I want to talk about other places. So interest centers that you're going to have in your classroom, it's great to have books there too. Books are something that we can read anywhere. You can read a book in bed, you can read a book on the couch, you can read a book on the train, you can read a book anywhere, and we want to illustrate that for children as well. So this one is for the block area, and I've chosen some books that are about building. So kids in the block area might want to sit and just read the book instead of playing with the blocks. Or they might want to use the book to give them some inspiration on what they are building. Dramatic play area. So we're going to learn about dramatic play areas, or we may have already. A dramatic play area might be set up as a fire station. So we'd want to have some books there about being a firefighter, fire stations, etc. You might set it up as a rocket ship with all kinds of things related to space and planets and stars and rockets. So you would have books related to that dramatic play theme. You also could have a chef. Let's just say we have it set up as a kitchen and you want children to have experience and see what a chef does. It's good to integrate books into the different dramatic play areas so that kids can learn about that. Science Center. So pictured here are a bunch of nonfiction books really illustrating about different animals. On the left side, different parts of the body on the right side. So once again, I want to be age appropriate, the books I select. So the ones on the right would not be very appropriate for a 3-year-old classroom. They'd be much more appropriate for a second grade classroom or a first grade classroom. So you really want to make sure that the books you're putting out make sense for the students that you have in your classroom. Another thing that you can do to make writing meaningful in the classroom, which is related to literacy, is to have what is shown here as a chart. So this particular chart is an attendance chart where children can take their own attendance. So I would imagine that before the day started, all the kids' names would be over in the pockets where the green and the blue are. And then when the kids get there, they would go and they would find their name and they would put it in the here side. And then after, the teacher might say, well, who's missing today? And the kids would say, well, Katie's missing and Max is missing. So then they would put them in the absent side. So this is just another way to use the written word in a meaningful way with young children. Similarly here, this is a chart that I found from a store. So this one looks like it has Velcro on it. So this is another way of doing the same kind of thing where the kids can find their name and put it up there. Whenever you can have children's pictures in the classroom, it makes the classroom theirs. It gives them ownership of the classroom. It makes them feel as they belong. So this is a really neat illustration of how you can do that. Another way to make print come alive is graphing like this. So this example that I found is called a favorite pet graph. So imagine you're sitting at a group time and you have this up in front and you've got a 3-year-old classroom, so they're not really into writing their names yet. But you go around and you say, hey, Billy, I see a dog, a cat, a rabbit, a fish, and a bird here. Which one of those would be your favorite animal? And he would say cat. So you would write cat down. You would write his name by cat. And you would do all the children in the group. And then at the end, you could see how many votes each had to learn more about popularity, which animal is the most popular among the kids that you have. So making a graph like that is something that you can do in many different ways. I've seen it done with favorite type of ice cream or favorite color of apple, etc. This brings us to the end of this topic. And if we were meeting in person, we would talk about any other ideas that students would have. So I thank you for participating in this training.